Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop. Oh wait a minute, take two. Hi y'all, welcome back to my shop. Last week in part one we turned an apple. If you didn't get a chance to see that, you can click on the annotation and it'll open that video up in a separate link. This week we're going to look at some other fruit. You can turn most any shape. I'll show you a close-up of these in just a moment. Just turn it round, maybe with a little point on it, and it'll look like a fruit. What kind? I don't know. Depends on the wood, depends on the shape, but you can use smaller pieces of exotic woods for those shapes. But today we're going to do a familiar shape to everybody, and that's this this pear. As long as it's flat on round on the bottom and a little narrow at the top, it'll look fine. And we're going to shape it very similar to an apple. The piece of wood we're going to use today is 3 by 3 by 4 3/4. I'm going to use this piece of spalted maple, which ought to look really lovely. Should have a lot of interest, much more so than the plain Bradford pear we used last week. And then I'm going to use a little scrap I had left over from some project, a little piece of macassar ebony. When you get a nice piece of scrap like this, go ahead and turn several of these stalks, make them in different sizes, maybe shapes. So when you have several of them, you've got something to choose from. And then, of course, next week in part 3, we're going to show you how to make these bananas. Okay, first thing we're going to do is mark center on here, and one way to do that on an irregular shaped piece of wood, where it's more a trapezoid or something, is use this circle finder. It's got described lines on it. I made this out of a piece of plexiglass using a compass. Wasn't any real problem. And then that way you can orient this thing to really find the center of the circle that's most appropriate for the fit. Okay, we got it mounted. This mounted between centers. Got a tool rest that's appropriate. It's good to have at least an inch or preferably more on each side of the tool rest so you don't accidentally run off. We're going to get the speed up a little bit. This is irregular shape of wood, so I'm going to knock the edges off of it before I turn the speed up too much. Using a spindle roughing gouge, anchor, ride the bevel, lift the handle to cut. As always, when we get the other direction, let's do the other direction. We want to pick up a corner piece with a crack hand and pull it along the star. This is taking adjust the rest a little bit closer. Keep in mind when you turn spalted wood, there's a certain amount of carbonization takes place, and you may find that this is really tough on your tools, and may need to call for resharpening sooner than you think. Mark it and put a tenon on it for the chuck. Okay, this pear is going to be an inch longer than it is wide. If you don't have a good shape in mind for a pear, Google images, draw you a couple, but get you an image in mind of what a pear is going to look like. I'm going to take one I previously turned and put it in my little comparator here so I can visually look at it and get a feel for trying to come up with something pretty close to that. See how long, so we can go ahead and mark that. So in this case, this is looks about 2.5 inches. So we're going to go to 3.5 inches for the length. And then lest I cut that line away, I'm going to go ahead and make a marking part. Just a little bit for the time being. And then I'm going to describe about where that transition from the bottom to the neck is going to be. That'll just kind of give me something to shoot for. And then I'm going to use the spindle gouge to go ahead and start that shape. I'm just wasting wood. Alright, I'm beginning to get a shape I can live with. Let me show you a close-up of that. We remove the tool rest as we do the end, so we're going to reorient our tool rest so we can again cut on center, and I'm putting it at a 45-degree angle so I can make that sweep all the way around and then indent it just a little bit. Lower just a little bit more. And I'm anchoring it with my little finger here. Make sure we ride the bevel. Again, this is the bevel that we're going to anchor on the wood. So you're going to see me swing this around, and when we finish, that bevel needs to be pointed in. So this is almost going to be perpendicular, or rather parallel with the bed weight. And then similar to the last time, we're going to use that toe of the skew, toe being the long point, heel being the short point, and just shape it a little bit deeper, make it easy to find it with a drill later. And then we can take this and just shift it around just a little bit, get a nice planing cut all the way around that profile. Got a little bit of a round area there, got to trim off. Okay, that looks good. Alright, so I'm going to part it down, and because we, again, like the apple, since we have so much room here at the bottom, we can come in behind it. We don't have to bother to do a jam chuck. But if you got a shorter piece, you could certainly make a jam chuck for this, turn this around, and hold it with a tailstock. And I think I'll show you how to do that. Okay, I'm not going to show you a lot about sanding, but I did want to show you my little sanding hood setup. This is connected to a 1.5 horsepower Harbor Freight with 4-inch hose. It's marginally adequate, but I want you to be able to see the. It really does pull a lot of dust off as it comes off here. So let me see if I hope this light will allow you to see that dust. As I said before, use your finish of choice when you're working on these. I'm going to go ahead and use some Mylan's lacquer sanding sealer while it's on the lathe and sand it and put another coat on it. It gives it a nice matte sheen. As most of y'all know, I typically use antique oil, but in this case you can get a very nice matte look, and I don't want this particular piece of fruit to look too shiny, so this will work real well for that. It only takes seconds to dry also. Normally for something like this, I'd go ahead and take this out of the chuck, put this in the jam chuck, and waste this away. But this wood's too pretty for that, and I can use it. So I'm going to carefully part it off right here and use that for support while it's jam chucked. So I'm just going to be careful, try to get a flat surface here, slightly undercut. Okay, I tend to keep a box of scraps, end pieces to use for jam chucks and friction chucks and whatnot. So I looked in my box, and lo and behold, I found one I must have used in times past for something like this, because it's fairly deep and narrow. It's got a square glue block on it, which will hold just fine. So we'll use this for a jam chuck. And hollow it out to fit. Okay, I've got it reversed chucked, jam chucked in this block I showed you. I'm using my Nova Live Center with a soft touch with a Morse taper that fits in here. That just holds it flat. If I used one with a point, I found that it was kind of splitting this wood a little bit and getting it to move side by side. It was hard to make adjustments. So this was pretty easy to get squared up straight, and it'll provide a little support. It's running a little bit off true. I could probably adjust that a little bit. It's running off true a little bit, but I think it'll be fine for doing the bottom. I'll come in from this side. Not providing quite as much support as I'd hoped for. Slow cuts. Slow the speed down a little bit to about 1,000. And come back in. We'll switch to a smaller gouge. 1/4 inch detail gouge, make it a little easier to get in there. And there we go. For a lot of small items, this is the easiest way to sand the bottom. Now, similar to the apple, we're just going to chew up the bottom a little bit with a skew. Being careful again not to cut ourselves. And then we're going to come in with that pyrography unit and burn the bottom. Some folks have had good success drilling a little hole and putting a whole clove in the bottom. So that's another thought. Okay, we're taking that little small piece scrap of macassar ebony. I fit it between these jaws. I'm going to turn this up to a very high speed so I can get a good clean cut. We're going to use the spindle, 3/8 inch spindle gouge to rough it. a 3/8 inch to size it with. That's pretty close. I just need to make sure this is perfectly round, and then we've got it. We're getting a little chatter, so I'm going to brace the back of it with my finger. Using the side of the long cutting edge, we're going to use it a little similar to a skew. This ebony has some natural oils in it, that, so it really doesn't need any finish, just polishing. So I'm going to use this product, U-Butte Triple E, which has got some Triple E in a wax base, which acts as a very, very mild abrasive, and it'll just polish this thing up beautifully. And then, as last time, we'll get that cross-cut saw, or flush-cut saw rather. Cut it at a 45-degree angle. Being careful not to force the cut. Tear it, but don't want to tear those last few fibers. Binding a little bit. There, and that leaves a pretty nice finish. I'll polish that up a little bit with a little 500 and we'll be done. Okay, I want you to be able to see the stalk, or rather the blossom on the bottom of this. So let me see if we can't get you a good close-up. So you can see how marking it up with a skew and then using a pyrography unit with a shader or a skew tip, burning tip works real well. And our completed pear. Thank y'all. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please share it with someone or subscribe. Next week, stay tuned for part 3 on making bananas. Till then, keep it safe.